In the grand finals of the LEC 2022 summer split, fan favorite G2 Esports go up against one of the strongest new kids on the block in Rogue. And to the surprise of many, G2 absolutely get put to the curb against Rogue thanks to their understanding of how they win the game, as well as their ability to dictate their drafts to help activate star players like Comp and really play to their strengths. It is the purpose of this video to help break down exactly how these drafts played out and to help visualize the reasoning for how Rogue were able to execute so well in this finals. Moving on to game 1 in the first phase of bans, G2 banned Lucian, Zeri, and Poppy, while Rogue banned Silas, Azir, and Senna. The main ban to keep in mind here, in my opinion, is actually the Senna, which indicates that Rogue does not want to deal with any of the slower pacing or shenanigans that this champion can bring to the table. Rogue wants to be able to express their strength on the bottom side, and this pick prevents G2 from being able to dilute any opportunities for Rogue to pop off. The pick start off with G2 actually opening with Jarvan, which on paper can make decent sense. This meta is currently dominated by strong front to back AD carries like Sivir and Kalista, so this allows Rogue to hedge a little bit against it when not showing too much themselves. This pick does not come without its own issues, however, because although the reasoning for this opener is good, Jarvan in this meta only inherently becomes extremely strong if other options are not available. This is reflected in the R1, R2 picks for Rogue, in which they lock the Kalista for Comp and take the Trundle as well, which are arguably two of the best in slot champions in their respective roles. This is where I personally enjoy the way LEC teams draft because they aren't afraid of being able to take risks. In the B2B3, G2 opts to go for the Draven-Ahri combination. Although it is a pick that many teams aren't necessarily willing to take, the Draven provides an excellent matchup into the Kalista and takes away some of the strengths of the pick in general. A big purpose for teams to pick Kalista in this meta is so that they can have a strong front to back carry that can also provide incredibly strong lane presence. The Draven pick completely curbs this Kalista and allows the strength to instead be in G2's court. The Ahri pick also serves a great purpose here in this case because it is a facilitator champion and allows G2 to really play for this Draven pick. If there's one thing I would flag about this thought, it is that Rogue have a lot of time to draft defensively to minimize the strengths of these two picks, and there's also the issue that a champion like Ahri brings relatively little damage to the table, so many teams can draft comps that have a margin for error and can simply stat check these champions. This leads to the draft to be centered around G2 being able to facilitate a strong lead in the mid game. For R3, Rogue simply picked the Ornn as a catch-all pick, and they can use their second phase bans to shield it against certain poor matchups. The Aatrox ban immediately comes out as a result. G2 respond with their own Akali ban, potentially for the Ahri, before Rogue commit their second ban onto shielding topside with the Yone. G2 used their last ban on Braum, which I think is fairly smart considering their current draft scenario. The main issue with G2's draft is that it's relatively clear at this point that they have to play forward and have to play for backline dive. When that is the case, the strength of Braum goes way up in many drafts because he is extremely oppressive in dealing with the dive. It also specifically counters Draven because his wall absorbs Draven's axes. Rogue used their R4 pick to match Ahri with LeBlanc, which is great because it actually gives a favorable matchup for mid and takes away from Ahri being able to do anything. For the B4-B5, G2 swing for the Gwen-Renata combo. Gwen is of course a decent pick into the Ornn for its scaling and side lane potential, while the Renata is a decent activator for Draven. But the weakness of this is that this gives Rogue an R5 support counter pick, which can pretty much lock in the draft with the right pick itself. Soraka is the call out here, and this is exactly the counter that I mean. In today's meta, when it's so full of enchanters, being able to counter pick and support is actually extremely valuable, because there are some matchups where it becomes extremely oppressive, especially in the right composition. Soraka is one of the strongest counterpick supports in the game right now because she must be punished in order for the enemy team to defeat her. But with so much front to back and defensive comps these days, if there aren't multiple immediate threats to delete her guaranteed, there isn't much that can be done to stop her. This nullifies the idea that Draven can stop lane against Kalista because now Rogue can play slower with the Kalista and not focus on combat, which allows Kalista to scale better with her team over the Draven. Combine the Soraka pick with winning matchups on both jungle and mid lane, and it creates an easy win condition for Rogue to just sit and stabilize the game while they can outscale very conveniently. G2 have the tools to punish and try to justify, but their main issue was that they revealed too much too early for the sake of attempting to shut down this Kalista R1, which in turn tunneled them into a comp without many options. Because of that, I would rate this draft 65-35 for Rogue. After the loss in Game 1, G2 opt for blue side once again in Game 2. This is a good choice by them because the current metagame is very blue side favored. With a lot of blindable champions available in the game and the current style of front to back scaling comps being hard to punish, there isn't much to worry about when playing blue. There's also plenty of strong B1 champions in the game right now that teams have to worry about. The bans come out, and G2 banned 3 ADCs this time in the Lucian, Zeri, and Kalista. Rogue, on the other hand, ended up banning Silas, Azir, and Senna, basically copying their bans from last time. The main adaptation this time is that G2 opted for a different opener, B1 and Trundle instead of Jarvan. Like I mentioned in Game 1, it's definitely a more flexible opener versus what we saw last time. Interestingly enough, Rogue decided to play the other side of the jungle matchup, instead opting to play the Jarvan side. The even more interesting thing to me is the raw R2 Caitlyn pick that I bet no one expected. On the surface, Caitlyn has no business being a pick that should work in this situation right now. However, if you think about it, and with the amount of bans that should have been focused towards the AD carry pool right now, it makes a lot of sense to bring it out. The The main alternatives that are available right now are champions like Sivir and Draven in this case, and the Caitlyn is a champion that can guarantee priority into both of these matchups. Being the bot-centric team that they are, it also helps a ton that they can pick a champion that guarantees this. For the B2-B3, G2 opt to just take some strong picks in slot and snag both the Aatrox and the Sivir, signing up for this bot lane dynamic that they are going for. For the R3, Rogue opted for the best matchup possible in this case while also being able to lock down the Sivir, so the Renekton fits the bill. Bans are relatively support focused in this case, with G2 getting rid of the Caitlyn Lux combo, as well as a potential support counterpick in Soraka, while Rogue removed the potential Yuumi pairing for Flakkid, as well as LeBlanc in the mid lane. Rogue picked the Ahri R4 since the LeBlanc has been removed here, and this also helps funnel resources into enabling both lanes for Rogue. Effectively, they're going to have direct winning lanes in every matchup around the map, which gives them a ton of opportunity to build a lead and hang on to it for the rest of the game. Karma Lissandra is the response from G2. Considering what's been picked so far, it's a pretty decent answer to cut down on that mobility. The Karma pick to me seems like more of a denial than anything from Rogue, as the Enchanter pool has been cut down quite significantly at this point. Karma fares pretty well here overall, as her main counters and champions like Soraka and Yuumi have already been removed from the game, and since Caitlyn has already been shown for Rogue, the Karma can help mitigate the potential prile this team has. I still don't like the pick overall, honestly, but it could be worse. Rogue rounded out the draft here with Tahm Kench, which is basically their form of drafting insurance for comp here. In any sort of struggle situation where he would potentially get cut out, he can basically buy himself out of a bad situation with the Eat. This comp is very interesting by Rogue as it centers entirely off of comp being able to snowball and get an advantage here, and has some resources to do so. However, it now goes onto G2 to just sit and scale for free. Because of this interesting Caitlyn pick on the side of Rogue being able to garner unique advantages in the early phases of draft, and the ease of execution on the side of G2's draft, I would actually rate this 55-45 in favor of Rogue. Moving on finally to the last game of the series in Game 3, things have not been working for G2 so far, so they end up attempting to switch up the pace of the draft and go for red side. Although it is unconventional to be giving a blue side in this meta, at this point the most important thing to have is that change of pace so that they can continue to play around with different playstyles and potentially take advantage of some spicy picks on R3 and R5. In this game, bans go somewhat as expected, with Rogue banning out Sylas, Senna, and Yuumi, and G2 end up banning Lucian, Renekton, and Kalista. For the B1, Rogue will lock in the Azir, which has been banned for the entirety of the series. Although it's certainly an incredibly strong pick overall, the main thing that changes with this opener is the game pace, giving fewer resources for Rogue to play with high-octane mid laners. For the B2-B3, Rogue again are clearly very happy with playing either side of the matchup for jungle, taking the Jarvan again and then blinding the Aatrox once more. G2 put their foot on the gas this time and swing for the Fiora matchup in the R3 slot. This is an excellent matchup for topside here and gives a win condition for Broken Blade to dominate the sideline in this case. The main thing to look out for in this case from this point is around the B4-B5 for Rogue and picking a bot side that allows Rogue to either play through bottom lane once more or to help minimize the potential damage from the topside matchup. It's on G2 to use their bans to stop this as much as possible as well. The bans come out and G2 get rid of the Caitlyn, not wanting to deal with that again. Rogue burned their first ban on LeBlanc, which helps limit the facilitation of resources for top lane for that Fiora matchup as well. G2 follow up with the Draven ban as well, while Rogue get rid of the Akali for the Azir matchup. G2 once again swing for the Ahri pick, which is the remaining champion that gets a decent matchup and allows for the accumulation of resources for topside here. Rogue respond with an all-in on the Sivir Lulu for bottom side, which is pretty strong but not necessarily out of the ordinary. G2 round out the draft with a Soraka pick of their own, which can be super strong on paper as I mentioned in game 1, but makes me a little bit concerned for the viability of their comp here. In this case, it's slightly harder for Soraka to thrive here, since Rogue have a lot of tools to be able to pin down Soraka and remove her from the game, and I don't really think that G2 have enough of a strong front-to-back formation to answer. Rogue was able to take advantage of it super well in game 1, because the team composition on the side of Rogue at that time gave enough room for Soraka to breathe, but with the only frontline on G2 side, this time being the Trundle, I think that it makes it much more difficult for Soraka to succeed in this environment. To me, it almost seems like Rogue understands these picks better than how G2 interprets them, and there is no exception to that in this draft here. This does not mean that they don't have nice matchups, especially on top side, so I rate this draft 60-40 in favor of Rogue. Overall, the trends from these drafts are relatively clear to me. The main difference I see across these two teams is that Rogue have a very clear understanding as to how their team likes to play the game, and their drafts are greatly focused on playing around that style, and they have a good understanding of how to adjust their champion ordering to favor this in draft. I think this difference was super apparent throughout this draft, and this was what allowed Rogue to really have a number on the way G2 was playing the series. As always, I hope this video was insightful, and I will catch you in the next one. Stay fresh.